I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Non-Moving Pictures, where we examine movie posters as art. A few times on this show, I've referenced the art of Reynold Brown, quite possibly the most prolific movie poster painter of the Atomic Age.
If you want to know more about his life, I recommend tracking down the biographical documentary The Man Who Drew Bug-Eyed Monsters, which is about as thorough as you can get. Maybe get a copy of an art book if you can find one for a reasonable price. Even without these insightful works, though, his art really speaks for itself.
He painted so many posters with so many different kinds of creatures on them that picking just one to focus on is really difficult to do. I have an idea, though it's not a very pleasant one. I'm open to suggestions, Snazzy. Let's hear it. How about the poster he did for the Dunwich Horror in 1970? It's October, which is Halloween month, and that makes it timely. But also, it's a significant one because it's the last poster he made before retiring. Oh yeah, I remember that one. Well, it may land the channel in hot water, but it would be an interesting subject for analysis. Now, what the heck? Let's give the poster for the Dunwich Horror a look.
As any Lovecraft fan knows, the Dunwich Horror is one of H.P. Lovecraft's longer stories that was adapted into a feature-length film in 1970, starring Dean Stockwell before his Quantum Leap days. The poster looks like this, showing a screaming woman based on Sandra Dee and a weird Gorgon-esque head above her. As is typical of Reynold Brown posters, we see things arranged in a way that helps guide the eye along the image. Note how every smaller head and odd appendage on the larger monster head angles towards the bottom, and even the large head's expression is looking down. This naturally guides us to Sandra's body, then onto her face, which is right next to the title. The arrangement works quite well, all things considered.
Still, this is a very simple poster, isn't it? It's especially simple when compared to other Reynold Brown posters.
Brown enjoyed painting posters, and he usually didn't skimp on the details. He painted entire scenes with landscapes and multiple characters, and he had a skill for creating a sense of motion despite the image being static. Waves appear to be crashing, cars appear to be speeding, monsters appear to be marching through cities or reaching for their victims. Brown's posters are always busy, but not in an overwhelming sense, and as a result, a person can stare at them for hours just drinking in the detail.
Stuff like that is what really made him a master of the art. In contrast with everything else, the poster for the Dunwich Horror is about as bare bones as a Reynold Brown poster can get.
To start with, there's no scenery. The backdrop is just a simple blue rectangle contained by a black border against a white backdrop. Heck, the black border isn't even complete, with only 3 sides forming a plain arch with the bottom left open. Plenty of detail can be found on the monster and Sandra, as well as good perspective and color contrast, but overall, the image doesn't have that much to it.
And you are, of course, going to explain why. Yeah, but this is where things not only get depressing, but also kinda nasty.
You may notice I haven't described what the scene is actually depicting yet, and I can only keep dancing around it for so long. Maybe some of you already put together, but I may as well rip off the band-aid and say it. The way this poster's 2 subjects are positioned is meant to look sexual in nature, and the expression on Sandra's face makes it clear that this is not consensual.
Now, to be clear, that is technically accurate to the movie. A large part of the plot for the film involves getting a character impregnated with the spawn of Yog-Sothoth. And there is a scene, which is not graphic by today's standards, but still pretty shocking, that does involve monster molestation followed by devouring. The movie was constantly pushing the boundaries of what it could get away with and not be labeled as blatant exploitation.
With that in mind, the poster is appropriate in its inappropriateness, though it can still be seen as bad taste.
Among the people who found the poster vile was no less than Reynold Brown himself. though to understand why, you need to know where he was at this point in his life.
Brown's career had flourished in the 50s, but he found himself struggling in the 60s. Monster movies were still being made, but they were gradually waning in popularity. The movies people wanted to see that decade were a bit more provocative, even if they ultimately didn't show anything graphic.
In order to stay employed, Brown found himself taking a lot of jobs where he had to paint images of a more sexual nature.
Now, to be clear, Brown had no problem painting gorgeous women, or even gorgeous women in tight outfits, or outfits that showed a bit of skin. He had done so plenty of times in the past. Still, the images he was being commissioned for that decade pushed the limits of what he considered tasteful.
Oftentimes he would hide these images when his children wandered into the studio because he didn't want them exposed to such imagery at a young age, nor did he want them knowing that he was the one making such imagery. I'm sure if Brown had had his way, he would have kept painting monster movie posters for his entire life. But at that point, monster movies just weren't popular anymore, and since movie posters were an art form considered as disposable as comic books, he probably wasn't going to be taken seriously by most quote-unquote real artists.
These lowbrow works were the only work he could get, and the Dunwich Horror was the final straw. This was essentially a rape scene, plain and simple, and Brown was disgusted by it. Again, he had painted women in peril before, but there's a world of difference between showing a monster carrying a woman and showing a monster forcing itself on a woman.
Even though he did the job he was paid for, this was what finally convinced him to lay down his brush forever.
He had been reduced to painting trashy imagery for trashy movies, a realization that took all the wind from his sails. His heart just wasn't in it anymore, and after finishing this job, he quietly retired in obscurity.
That is a very depressing story, Omni. I agree, Snazzy, but there's no need to cry for him. Reynold Brown would be recognized in his own lifetime.
The aforementioned documentary was filmed while he was still alive, and in the decades since, Brown was recognized for the brilliant artist that he was. Even so, it is unfortunate that Brown's career ended in such a way as this. Here was a man who almost single-handedly perfected an art style that people did not at first appreciate, and despite the iconic imagery he produced, his final piece was something he found so repulsive that it repelled him right into retirement. Though his career ended on a sour note, he still left behind one heck of a legacy. As for this image, it's not his best, but it still showcases what a good artistic eye he had, even with its simplicity.
Still, that's about all I can say for the Dunwich Horror poster, and since I'm already risking my channel by showing it, I may as well end the video here. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. So, what poster will I do next? Maybe it's time we took a trip back to Skull Island.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.